Peter Adamson, and you're listening to the History of Philosophy podcast, brought to you with the support of the Philosophy Department at King's College London and the LMU in Munich. Online at historyofphilosophy.net. Today's episode, He Unwilling, She Unwilling, Jean Racine. There's an intriguing passage in Aristotle's Poetics, one I've had occasion to mention before, in which he says that poetry is closer to philosophy than history. And he doesn't mean in alphabetical order. His point is that poets, like philosophers, are interested in the universal, what persons of a given general type would do in a given situation, as opposed to what real particular individuals have chosen to do, which is the historian's remit. Aristotle adds that those poets who write tragedies nonetheless attach their universally resonant tales to particular names from the historical past. This is a good idea, because the story being told on stage needs to be believable, and what could be more believable than something that actually happened? Still, the tragedian need not stick closely to actual events because historical accuracy is not his purpose. Aristotle is describing what we now call poetic license, the artist's freedom to transform characters from real life into properly literary characters, meaning characters who stand for a type or an idea. Perhaps no poet has ever taken this message to heart more than Jean Racine, who I'll go ahead and call the greatest tragic writer of early modern France, even though his contemporary and rival, Pierre Corneille, would complain about being put into second place. Racine's life story fits snugly into the cultural developments we've been following in recent episodes, because after the early death of his parents, he was brought by his grandmother to be raised and educated at, you guessed it, the Port Royal Monastery. This means that his outlook was shaped by Jansenism, yet he pursued the vocation of a dramatist, something heavily criticized by some Jansenist writers, for instance Pierre Nicole, who authored the Port Royal Logic together with Arnaud. Early in his career, Racine worked with Molière's theatre troupe. I'll come back to the comparison between Racine's tragedies and the comedies of Molière. In due course, Racine established himself as a star of theatre by writing plays with antique settings, based either on mythical stories or accounts from ancient histories. For instance, he says in the preface to one of his greatest plays, Britannicus, that the characters are all taken from Tacitus, whom he calls the greatest painter of antiquity. This was followed by further masterpieces, including Berenice and Phèdre, which I'll also be discussing in this episode. All three plays come from the 1670s, an outpouring of creativity that was brought to a halt when Racine was made the official historiographer of the court of Louis XIV. This was a huge boost for his standing and wealth, and led to further titles and appointments. But the promotion largely put an end to his life as a dramatist. Racine's life as a whole concluded right at the end of the century with him dying in 1699. The play Britannicus nicely illustrates Racine's approach to historical material, which follows Aristotle's recommendations. It features three famous figures from Roman history: the notoriously tyrannical emperor Nero, his overbearing mother Agrippina, and Nero's half-brother Britannicus, also the son of Agrippina. Racine has also plucked a more obscure figure from the historical annals, named Junia, in order to set up a love triangle between her, Nero, and Britannicus. The play relies on the audience to know the story of these characters. In the brief time covered by the action on stage, we see Nero evolve from a love-struck young man under the sway of his mother to a murderer and budding monster, in the words of Racine himself. With heavy irony, the play ends with a morally upright character named Boris crying out, "Would to the gods this crime might be his last!" And of course the audience knows that it won't. Yet the play also relies on the audience to accept the transformation of these famous Romans into new citizens of 17th century Paris, as one commentator has put it. They are driven less by ambition or honor than by intense feelings of romantic love. Nero talks and acts like a particularly emotional French aristocrat who unexpectedly finds himself cast in the role of Roman emperor. This historical dissonance works well, though, because it accentuates the conflicts experienced by the characters themselves. We see this in another play inspired by Roman history, Berenice. It too centers on a love triangle between the emperor, Titus, his friend Antiochus, and the queen of Palestine, Berenice, who has captured the hearts of both men. Though Berenice loves Titus, not Antiochus, and Titus loves her too, he very reluctantly decides to break with her because he is convinced that the Roman people will not accept a marriage between him and a foreign queen. This plot was inspired by a remark of the historian Suetonius, that Titus sent Berenice away from Rome invitus invitam, he unwilling, she unwilling. Out of a sense of duty, Titus must thwart his own heart's will and give up a life of happiness because, as he says, life is not what matters, I must reign. He comments bitterly on the fact that his power over the world is not matched by his power over himself. I can make kings, and kings I can depose, yet of mine own heart I cannot dispose. In making his fateful choice, Titus must, as he puts it, seek my own soul and learn what I am. Some readers detect here the legacy of Racine's upbringing amongst the Jansenists. Like them, Racine is alive to the waywardness and mysteries of the human will, and the impossibility of bringing it fully and permanently under the control of reason. This theme attracted the notice of no less an interpreter than Michel Foucault, who said that the purpose of Racine's tragedies is to show the torn ceremony, the moment when the person who holds public power, the sovereign, decomposes little by little into a man of passion. It's apt that Racine has chosen Roman history to explore this theme, because he is implicitly critiquing the ethic that is most associated with the Romans, namely Stoicism. We saw Descartes drawing on the Stoics to put forth an optimistic ethical theory, according to which the passions can be subordinated to rationality if one just makes enough of an effort. Like Elizabeth of Bohemia, Racine seems to be unconvinced. Racine's greatest study of this theme is his play Phaedra, which is based not on Roman historical events, but on a play by Euripides. Here the plot is a bit more complicated, and I won't trouble you with the details. Better that you just read the play. For our purposes, it suffices to know that the title character, Phaedra, has been driven half-mad by unrequited love. She thus stands for the defeat of reason by passion, the inverse of the state praised by Descartes. Like Titus in Berenice, she compares political power to the power of self-control, rejecting the throne by saying that she can hardly rule a state when she is unable to rule herself. Unable to heal the fracture within her own personality, she is led to self-condemnation, as in this remarkable speech. Do not think that while I love, spotless in mine own eyes I do approve of what I am, nor that of the perverse passion that shakes my reason. I did nurse the poison by an abject yielding, nay, of heaven's wrath the miserable prey, more than thou loathest me, do I abhor myself. Due to their lack of self-mastery, Racine's characters are frequently unable to hide their emotions and secrets from each other. Thus in Britannicus, Nero avoids seeing his mother because he knows she will be able to read everything in his face. Tellingly, he gains control over his demeanor by the end of the play, but only by becoming a moral monster. Racine seems to be suggesting, not unlike La Rochefoucauld, that self-betrayal is just part of the human condition. And this is typical of Racine, who uses ancient characters to convey modern ideas. He claims to be achieving that effect simply by putting the classical stories on stage. In his preface to another play, Iphigenia, he writes, I have noted with pleasure from the effect that all I have copied from Homer or Euripides has produced in our own theatre, that good sense and reason were the same in every century. The taste of Paris has been found to conform to that of Athens. In fact, though, his genius is to use ancient materials to frame experiences that would seem familiar to his contemporaries, and still to us. Those ancient materials include the famous strictures placed on dramatic productions by Aristotle, the so-called unities. A play should deal with a single sequence of action, unfolding over a single time in a single place. Racine knew his Aristotle well, even translating some passages from the Poetics in the margins of a Greek edition. Defending Britannicus against critics, Racine says that his play is natural, precisely because it abides by the Aristotelian unities. This is why not very much happens in the play, which had attracted complaints. It's just the consequence of presenting one unified action that occurs in a brief stretch of time. Alongside such criticism at the level of plot, Racine also felt the need to defend the moral value of his work. By their very nature, his classicizing tragedies were not going to provoke the kind of outrage that greeted Molière's scandalous comedies. But pious men like Pierre Nicole were condemning theatre as a whole, while the moralizing author Saint-Evremond took aim at Racine's chosen genre, commenting that the spirit of our religion is diametrically opposed to that of tragedy. Racine responded in the preface to Phaedra, explaining that he had carefully followed Aristotle's recommendations for the characterization of a tragic hero. Phaedra and her love object, Hippolytus, must arouse both pity and terror, for which purpose Racine has calibrated the degree of their virtue and vice, making Phaedra a bit better than she is presented by ancient historians, and Hippolytus a bit worse. As he puts it elsewhere, the characters need to be neither completely good nor completely bad. He's also ensured that even small sins are punished in the course of the play. Vice, he explains, is painted throughout in colors which bring out its hideousness and hatefulness. That is really the objective which everyone working for the public should have in mind, and it is what the tragedians of early times aimed at, above all else. There's a clear tension, if not outright contradiction, here. Is Racine a faithful Aristotelian, giving us nuanced characters with whom we can identify so that we are emotionally gripped by their tragic fate? Or is he a didactic moralist, showing how the bad get their comeuppance? Overall, the plays seem to adhere much more to the Aristotelian line. It has been complained that his female characters tend to be either outright wicked or pure in virtue. It's natural to infer that the ambitious and scheming Agrippina in Britannicus is a warning against allowing women to get too close to politics. A constant refrain in the play is that she wants Nero to treat her as a trusted advisor and not just a mother, and it hardly seems that we're invited to admire her ambition. Phaedra, the tragic hero of her own eponymous play, is hardly admirable either, but she is at least given psychological complexity and shown struggling against her passions, much as the male characters do. She's more sympathetic than Nero, though that's not saying much. Speaking of which, there is at least one ethical message in these plays, one implicitly aimed at Louis XIV and his court. The good ruler is not a tyrant. That's hardly a radical or advanced moral precept, admittedly, but in matters of morality, sometimes people need to be told what they already know. This is certainly true of Racine's main characters, who are frequently supplied with sidekicks with whom they discuss their situation. A particularly clear case is Berenice, which features no fewer than 3 advisor characters, one for each main character: Paulinus for Titus, Phenice for Berenice, and Arsaces for Antiochus. This is strikingly reminiscent of the reasoner figures in Molière's plays. Their role is to give sound, rational advice that the ridiculous main characters can then ignore. But, as in Molière, things are not quite so clear-cut. Racine's advisors are sometimes rather cynical or outright devious, encouraging the worst instincts of their main character friends. In Britannicus, Nero is paired with a kind of anti-reasoner who bears the telling name Narcissus. He feeds Nero's ego and guides him towards the wickedness that is his destiny. On the other side of the ledger is Burrus, a paragon of rationality who refuses to admit that passion is irresistible. One never loves who does not wish to love. It's also telling that Burrus is, at several points, mentioned alongside the name of Seneca. This ancient Stoic never actually appears in the play, but by connecting Burrus to him, Racine implies that he is a spokesman for the optimistic and rationalist Stoic ethic, whose inadequacies are revealed as the action proceeds. As I say, the use of confidants as foils for the main characters is something Racine's tragedies share with the comedies of Molière. And the similarities don't stop there. Racine writes scenes that could easily have been played for laughs, like one in which Nero hides while listening to Junia talk to Britannicus. Having been threatened by Nero and knowing he is watching, she is forced to treat her lover with feigned cruelty. It's a situation that could easily appear in a farce, but instead it is heartbreaking because of our sympathy for both Junia and the bewildered Britannicus. It's also an opportunity for Racine to underscore the point about controlling the passions. When Junia is later able to explain to Britannicus what was happening, she describes the emotional torment she went through. With my love I vainly strove, I wish that I might never have known love. While we shouldn't push the comparison too far, it would be fair to say that the works of Racine and Molière do resemble each other quite a bit. This is true in formal terms. The plays always have 5 acts, and a fairly straightforward or unified plot, driven forward by dialogues between 2 characters, one of whom is typically a reasoner, who externalizes the main character's more rational nature. It's also true in thematic terms. Racine returns, again and again, to inner psychological conflict, a tragic version of the hypocrisy that was the central subject of Moliere's comedies. Indeed, in France, the mid to late 17th century was nothing less than an age of hypocrisy, irony, and self deception. There are good reasons for that. Political life was dominated by a king who favored spectacle over substance, and Jansenist authors like Pascal, and of course Janssens himself, had initiated a searching critique of the human self in order to lay bare its weakness and sinfulness. Everything we've looked at over the last episodes, from the theatre of Molière and Racine to La Rochefoucauld's maxims, and even the self-consciously propagandistic gardens of Versailles, fits into this picture. It feels, for lack of a better term, distinctively modern. But not everyone was engaged in a fruitless attempt to, in the words of Racine's Titus, learn what I am. Some were trying to divest themselves of the self-love that the moralists saw as an inevitable aspect of the human condition. By devoting themselves entirely to God, they hoped to achieve a kind of spiritual stillness. In this age of hypocrisy, they couldn't have been more sincere. I'm talking, at a suitably low volume, about the mystical authors like Madame Guyon and François Fénelon, who are designated with the term quietists. So join me next time for that, here on the History of Philosophy Without Any Gaps.